24 hours ago, we were sitting right here, stunned. Melissa Howard finally owned up to her lying about graduating from Miami University of Ohio and forging that diploma she produced after being confronted with questions, but she vowed to stay in the race for her party's nomination. Today, after another day of humiliating national headlines and private hand-wringing of local Republican leaders, Howard announced she realized the right thing to do for the community is to withdraw from the race, acknowledging she made a terrible error in judgment. And joining us for more is the man who now wins the Republican nomination by default, Tommy Gregory, Liv Coleman, who will be facing Gregory this fall in the general election, Zach Anderson, who did terrific work on this story for the Herald Tribune, and joining us by Skype is Sarasota Republican Chair Joe Gruders. And Joe, I'm going to start with you. If you could tell us what went on in the last 24 hours that made Melissa Howard go from vowing to stay in the race to leaving it.
Yeah, well, Alan, I think over the last couple of days, I think the whole situation got worse and worse for Melissa, and I think finally it came to the culmination today where I think a couple of us got on the phone call with her consultant, Anthony Pedicini, and said that something probably needs to happen, and I think she did the right thing for the community. I think it's going to save the party and the community a lot of heartache. We could put this behind us now and focus on the general. We got a great general election candidate, and we're ready to win.
Joe, wasn't that obvious as of last Friday when the facts were out there and then the photographs came out and quickly the university said there was something not right there?
Listen, you always have to take everybody at their word, and once people realized what was going on and the enormous impact it actually had throughout the community. Obviously, this was nationwide news. This wasn't located just in Sarasota. This was all over the country, and I think what happened was it just became too much to overcome for Melissa. And like I said, I think it was ultimately her decision, and I think she did the right thing.
Zach, you talked to the same people I talked to about this. We knew that there were a lot of people in the Republican leadership that were, as I mentioned before, wringing their hands, caught in a very uncomfortable position to be in, and really kind of not liking the hands-off approach over the last few days.
Yeah, hand-wringing is a good way to describe it. Other words that I've used are embarrassing, national laughingstock. I think a lot of Republicans especially worried that this was really harming the party, harming the brand, and would hurt them going into the general election.
Tommy, you were locked in a very competitive, really heated contest with Melissa Howard to this point. What's your reaction tonight? And you got to say, congratulations on being the Republican nominee for State House.
Well, thank you, Alan. My reaction first is to note that I spoke to Melissa earlier today. She's apologized. You read what she posted online. She apologized to me personally for what she did and for the rancor that was, part of this campaign. And look, going forward, I wish Melissa the best. I think that she's done a lot of great things in the community, and she'll continue to do that in her nonprofit work.
And Liv, you've been an interesting observer of this process here. I'm wondering what your thought process has been over the last few days, because there was a possibility that Melissa Howard could still run and even win the Republican nomination, and then you would be locked in with her in terms of the general election. What was going through your mind?
Well, I had the same questions that many people had about honesty and integrity. I know that voters want somebody who's transparent about who they really are. But Melissa Howard, she stepped up. She came clean and admitted that the diploma was a forgery. And I applaud her for coming to clean in that way. And I think we can move forward now.
So, Joe, what kind of situation are Republicans in right now? I mean, we all know that this is going to be a challenging midterm for Republicans, given the national environment and the mood, and we're getting reminders every time we look at a special election in Ohio or Pennsylvania before that this was the last thing that you needed as your slate of candidates is trying to, including yourself, is trying to run in the fall.
Well, the good news is we got a slate of great candidates in Sarasota, and I think that Tommy Gregory is one of our best candidates. I think we're going to be ready. I think now, listen, this lifts the whole cloud off the entire party, because now we can focus on the issues And I think that, Sarasota County, we've been blessed with phenomenal elected officials. They've set the stage to where our local citizens continue to vote Republicans in. And with the slate that I think we're going to have come 2 weeks from now, I think we'll be ready, and I think we're going to win across the board. I don't think we'll lose a single seat here in Sarasota.
So, Zach, is it as simple as that?
Well, it's interesting that Joe said this lifts a cloud off the party. I've heard some people sort of push back against the idea that she was kind of dragging down the whole ticket, but I heard a number of people say that they thought that she might drag down the ticket to some degree, and that every candidate would be asked about this and do you support this? What do you think about her, lying, and do you think that this represents the Republican Party in a good light, and that this would just be an unflattering thing that every candidate would have to address? So I think the party is happy to have it off their back, so to speak, and that they think that they'll not have to deal with this in the general election. I think that there'll still be some questions. I think Joe will still continue to face some questions, and others in the party about sort of how they dealt with this. I heard some grumbling from people that the party should have gotten out in front of this a little bit sooner. But when you drop out of the race, it's sort of over and done with.
And Tommy, but you still have work to do in terms of getting the Republicans together, because this, up until now, it was a very hotly contested primary campaign. And I know, on the other hand, a lot of primaries were like that.
Sure. Now it's time to turn our attention to the general election now that we know who the candidates will be. It's my job now to earn the trust of all the voters in District 73 and focus on the agenda. And for me, that means, ensuring that we're passing legislation in Tallahassee that increases our wage and job growth, invest in high-class schools, and really protects our quality of life.
And we're going to get to that R versus D debate in just a moment. We are just getting warmed up on the state representative candidate, Melissa Howard, dropping out of the race. We'll have much more after a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about the withdrawal of Melissa Howard from the race for state representative, and joining us for more is the man who now wins the Republican nomination by default, Tommy Gregory, Liv Coleman, who will be facing Gregory this fall in the general election, Zach Anderson, who did a terrific job on this story for the Herald Tribune, and joining us by Skype is Sarasota Republican Chair Joe Gruters. And Joe, I know you wanted to respond to something that Zach said about a lot of rumblings from within the Republican Party, from folks who feel that that they're not too happy with how the party responded to these allegations in the early days.
Yes, the party's role is, sorry, I got kids in the background here. The party's role ultimately is to not pick leaders in these primaries. And as hard as it is sometimes, much as people want us to go in and make a pick and make a decision, in this case, it's really difficult. But what you saw is you saw the Manatee Republican Party and the Sarasota Republican Party come together and basically say that we are going to continue to let the voters decide. That doesn't mean that we weren't trying to calm the situation down. Basically, what our job is to try to do the best job we can for all of our candidates. Whoever, once our nominee is selected, we take that nominee and we help them all the way to the general. But until then, we let these guys fight it out, and it's and I personally have trust in the system, because I think that even if Melissa would have continued on, Tommy would have crushed her in 2 weeks. And to me, there's no doubt about it, because I think the voters are smart, and I don't think that something like this could be overcome. And I think ultimately Melissa came to that conclusion and made the right decisions. And so now we're here with Tommy, who is a great candidate.
But Joe, let me push back about something. And I know that this is a primary and not a general election situation. But a couple of weeks ago, when Nick Guy liked something inappropriate on Facebook that actually referenced your wife, the party was really quick to demand that the Democrats disavow his campaign. But now we see a Republican candidate lie and basically forge a diploma, and there was no quick reaction in basically saying, we think this is wrong, she needs to get out.
Well, it was interesting that it come from Republicans and it came from Republicans this time. But I think when you looked at the leadership, I never made that call for Nick Guy to step down. And I don't think that the Democrat leader did either. And I don't think the Manatee leader did. Basically, most leaders of the parties try to be calm and collected during this campaign, because as we can see, there's huge ups and downs. It's like a giant roller coaster. be the calm in the storm to keep people focused in on the general. Let these guys fight it out. Let them try to win. But at the end of the day, we're going to be ready to carry our flag for our nominee to victory.
Okay, we'll hear from the two remaining candidates for the State House, District 73, in a moment. Welcome back. We're talking about the withdrawal of Melissa Howard from the race for state representative, and joining us for more is the man who now wins the Republican nomination, Tommy Gregory, Liv Coleman, who will be facing him this fall, Zach Anderson, who did a terrific job working on this story for the Herald Tribune, and by Skype, Sarasota Republican Chair Joe Gruters. Zach, let me start with you. Are the dynamics of this district different now because of the overall mood and what we hear about a possible blue wave? And does this complicate things for the Republicans?
We'll see. You know, this has historically been a very strongly GOP-leaning district. I mean, this is a district that Trump won by double digits. But obviously, Democrats are thinking that this year could be different. I think that's probably, you'd have to ask Liv, but I think that's one of the reasons that she might have gotten into the race is that, you know, there's a sense that here that even in some of these districts that Democrats could have a shot this year. Will this whole scandal change things? It's really hard to say.
Liv, let me give you an opportunity to talk about this. I mean, you're very well credentialed, University of Tampa. What brought you into this race? Why do you think this year is different than any other year?
I'm an educator from a family of educators, and I'm running to make Florida public schools #1. I talk to voters all across Manatee and Sarasota, and they're worried about their kids being on lockdown in schools and gun violence. They're worried about their schools getting a top-notch education. So I'm meeting voters every day, working hard across the district, and I can't wait, and I'd be honored to serve them in Tallahassee.
Okay. We're going to get to you, Tommy, in just a moment, but we have to take a quick break. Our conversation on the controversy surrounding Melissa Howard will continue after a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about the withdrawal of Melissa Howard from the race for state representative, and joining us for more is the man who now wins the Republican nomination, Tommy Gregory, Liv Coleman, who will be facing him this fall, Zach Anderson of the Herald Tribune, and joining us by Skype is Sarasota Republican Chair Joe Gruters. And Joe, I'm going to start with you. If you could explain briefly just the mechanics when a candidate leaves the race. What happens to those votes? Voting by mail is already out there. Do those votes just go away?
Yeah, what happens when a candidate the race is all of a sudden ballot in favor of Melissa or Tommy in this case now gets thrown out, because now that Tommy is our nominee, we no longer have a primary, so no votes will ever even be recorded or presented to anybody. Those votes are now invalid.
And, you know, there was discussion, and I know, I mean, this is academic now, but the incoming Speaker of the House was asked about this, that if Melissa Howard did in fact win the primary and win the general election, would the caucus have prevented her from being seated? Any insight into that?
Yeah, well, what would have happened? Like I said, sometimes not everybody sees everything that's going on. The most important thing was to try to do the primary, but also, you know, Republicans sometimes act a little bit clashier in terms of some of the times when we deal with some of our internal problems. We don't want to beat over the head sometimes for everybody. And in this case, we had a candidate. She exited the state. Gave us the opportunity. Now our candidate can now her Democratic opponent in November with more controversy, more election, more money. He's going to win.
You know, Joe, you're breaking up there. Joe, you're breaking up just a little bit, but I think Zach had something to add to that.
To your point, I actually did some reporting on what could happen if the Republican caucus didn't want to seat her, and that is extremely rare, I learned, to expel somebody or not seat them. It's only happened once in the history of the Florida House, back in 1961, I was told, when a House member was actually accused of having indecent exchanges with a 12-year-old page, and he was expelled from the House. It's very, very rare for somebody to get expelled, so it was probably unlikely. Melissa Howard, even the people who are saying that this might be a crime, it looks like it would probably only be a misdemeanor if, in fact, they did move forward with it. And there's people who have gotten DUIs, other misdemeanor crimes, who are still in the legislature. So if she had won the primary and won the general election, she probably probably almost certainly would have been seated unless she was charged with a felony or something worse.
So now the two of you are running at a time when there is incredible cynicism about politics and about electoral politics, and frankly, the comments that I've read from our viewers on our Facebook page are saying they're all liars. And Tommy, you're running, you're running at a time, especially given what's happening in Washington and all the questions there, that people do not like politicians right now, and you are running in this may be a safe Republican district. We don't know that yet. We do know that there is a certain mood out there. How do you go about taking that on?
Well, I don't think it's a new phenomenon that people are cynical and distrusting of politicians, but I agree it is a high percentage now, and there's a lot of discussion of it. And that's why my focus is on earning all of their trust. And really, Alan, it's part of the reason I'm running, and that is because I believe we need to elect leaders that have the skills and the education and the experience to represent the constituents of District 73 in Southwest Florida with honor and integrity. And I've got 25 years doing just that, 25 years of experience in the Air Force, and 20 years in the Air Force and 5 years since then, working with and for general officers and CEOs and fighter pilots and astronauts in high-profile, high-pressure situations. So my resume demonstrates that I can be trusted.
Liv, let me ask you this. Are you planning to use what's happened over the last week going into the general election campaign, even though Melissa Howard is no longer running? And how do you appeal to voters in this district, which has a history of voting for Republican? How do you win back white middle-class voters who have aligned themselves, at least locally, with the Republican Party?
Well, for too long, the Florida State Legislature has been out of step with what people want, even here in this district. I'm out there every day meeting voters, and I hear that they want better public schools. I'm an educator from a family of educators. I'm running to make Florida public schools #1. I'm here to fight for the environment, for clean water, and to keep our beautiful Florida beautiful. And I'm also running to make sure we've got affordable, accessible health care. These are things that voters all across the board, regardless of label, regardless of whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, this is what voters are, I'm hearing from them about what they want.
Let me ask you this. Over the last week, as this race has gotten a lot of state and national attention, have you been in communication with Democrats in Tallahassee who have become more interested in this race, given what the opportunity might be because of the Howard situation?
Not really. I think people have just been aware of how sensitive this is, and because of the medical issues regarding Melissa Howard's husband, that I think people have just taken a step back and let kind of things play out. And so right now we're just looking to see where we're going forward, though.
Alan, can I just say something? I think you really hit the nail on the head in the sense of how this could impact the race going forward, and how Melissa Howard's whole scandal could impact the race going forward, and how cynical people are about politics, and how they think politicians are dishonest. And I think if anything, this could play into that, and if it affects the race, it could maybe depress turnout to some degree, where people are just think that, well, these people are all liars and I'm not going to even participate in this. And I don't know if who that helps or hurts, but I think that could be the impact going forward on this race.
Zach, actually, Joe, a brief word for you, because basically you're the boss. You are the Republican chair, and you also have skin in the game because you are running for Senate. And before this situation really came up, you know that this is not your ordinary midterm election, that there is a national mood out there. You have other candidates, including yourself, on the ballot that potentially could have been impacted if the Howard situation basically just depressed Republican voters out there.
And at the end of the day, the right thing happened. She stepped aside, and now we can focus on the general. In this race in particular, remember, this is my race that I'm vacating. It's a plus 28 district. Tommy Gregory is going to win this seat. He's a phenomenal candidate, and at the end of the day, candidates matter. And we have the perfect candidate in Tommy. We're excited to have him run on our ticket. And there's no question in my mind he'll be able to stay with victory come November.
Liv, for better or for worse, the parties, both of them, pick winners and losers because there's limited money out there, there's limited resources. So the question is, given this opportunity right now, what are you doing differently to raise money in order to communicate the message you hope to get to voters this fall?
We're trying to get out and reach as many voters right here in Manatee and Sarasota as we can. We're trying to go to as many meet and greets to talk to voters. We're trying to make phone calls with phone banks. We're doing canvassing and door knocks. We're doing this as many days as we can every week.
And Tommy, the same thing goes with the Republicans. The Republican Party picks and chooses seats that they want to focus on. This may not have been on the radar because it was considered a safe Republican seat, but the damage has been done. Do you have to do things that you have not done up until this point in terms of raising massive amounts of money to make sure that you win?
No, and my success in fundraising, I think, demonstrates that the reason why we're not worried about a voter turnout, I don't think it's going to have any impact. If you look at my contributions, I think I'm over 200 now, and I'm most proud of the constant contributions I get in small amounts. You know, the flow of $10 checks or $25 checks. There are a lot of Republicans at every income level that are excited about my campaign and excited about races across the board.
Okay, we have to take another quick break, and we'll be back for final thoughts in a moment when we return. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. Quickly, Joe, lessons learned.
Well, the lesson learned is the Republican Party of Sarasota is as strong as ever. You know, to trust the system, that's what I want you to take away with tonight. You know, sometimes it doesn't things like we have control. It doesn't look like we have control, but ultimately things work out for the right reasons. And in this race, we have the right candidate running. In the general, Tommy Gregory is a phenomenal candidate, and he's going to win in November. We're glad to have him as our nominee.
We know what Melissa's mistake was here, but did party leaders, you and your counterpart in Manatee County, make any mistakes over the last week?
No, because you don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. Our job is to keep people calm and to do the best job we can. So what we did is, our job is not to engage in primaries, but to ensure that throughout this process, things are smooth. And I think at the end of the day, we did the right thing. And, you know, a lot of things happen in the background that people don't always see. But I'm glad that Melissa stepped aside, and now we have a great candidate, Tommy, and we're going to win.
Zach, is that the general perception?
I've talked to a number of Republicans who think the party should have been more forceful to protect the brand. Joe's in a difficult situation, you know. I mean, he's trying to referee this and not, you know, put his finger on the scale. And, you know, he has told me, you know, this could be a slippery slope. Where do you draw the line in calling people to drop out of the race? But at some point, parties, you know, they do get involved in things like that. We saw the Democratic Party locally get involved with Ed James. Now, that was a pretty big deal. He was accused of rape. I mean, that was a really big deal, but they came out forcefully and told him to get out of the race. So parties do get involved in these races. Where you draw the line, I mean, that's a subjective call, but I have heard people grumble about it.
Liv, this is your first opportunity to tell people why they should consider you this fall. This race has not gotten the kind of highlight that it's getting right now.
I'm an educator from a family of educators. I'm running to make Florida public schools #1. We need to keep our students safe in school. We need to make sure our tax dollars stay in the public school system and they don't get diverted to for-profit charter schools. And we need to make sure that our teachers and our kids get the resources and infrastructure they need.
Tommy, what do you think you need to do differently now, given the way this primary ended up, that you might not have had to do should you have won this primary straight up?
I don't think it changes anything, Alan. I think at the end of the primary, whether it ended now or on August 28th, you know, we'll turn our attention to, frankly, Liv and I have a lot of the same goals. Like many things that are debated between conservatives and liberals, we have the same goals: to ensure we have world-class education, to ensure we protect our quality of life. These are things that are part of our agenda. The difference is whether or not you believe big government is the key to prosperity, or like I do believe that individuals and working families are the way to success and prosperity and liberty.
Okay, Zach, I think this is going to be an interesting election.
It already has been, and you know, as we go along here, I'm sure there will be plenty of more sensational stories.
Okay, we have to leave it there. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of the viewers are saying when we broke this story on Facebook Live earlier today. Just a reminder. The story of Howard not having her college degree first came out. Howard's political consultant called it fake news. Here's what some of you were saying when the news broke. Macy says, it was her intent to deceive. She got caught. She's not even a good liar. The only thing fake was her diploma. Linda says all politicians start out with good intentions but get caught up in the environment of corruption. Takes a very strong politician to keep their conscience clean. I hope some of our new politicians stay straight. And John says, oh yeah, let's let the news channels break down what happened. The lady lied. What is there to break down? Media equals scum of the earth. Wow, John, looks like you're the member of the media as the enemy of the People Club. Well, it was good, hard-nosed journalism that uncovered this story, John, the same kind of good, hard-nosed journalism done every day here on the Suncoast and in Washington, D.C. these days. If you'd like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/mysuncoast. We want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Tommy Gregory, Liv Coleman, who will be facing Gregory this fall in the general election, Zach Anderson of the Herald Tribune, and joining us by Skype, Republican Chair Joe Gruters